Hello, welcome to our zine presentation. Zines are essentially collages with both text and images on them that you DIY yourself. We use them to express the concept of patriarchy, and all of our zines have different elements or facets of it. And in this presentation, we hope to show you the design process and what we each made.
So for my page, I want to start off with an introduction of what patriarchy is, which is defined as a social system that focuses on male dominance and then in turn the inferiority of women, whether that's in domestic spaces, religious spaces, um, etc. It relies on the foundational belief of a superior and inferior party in which it's natural for the powerful to rule, which I pulled from our lectures. This idea creates a constantly perpetuated divide between men and women, and in many other ways as well when we're examining intersectionality. So for our group, we decided to use a zine and examine different aspects of the patriarchy throughout history and in modern day, through a collage of images and ideas to examine the impacts it has on intersectionality and pleasure. Um, yeah, and then for my collage for this page, I wanted to introduce the concept and its prevalence with like a large and kind of overarching lettering for the title, which you can see kind of takes up a lot of space. And I combined traditional images of women in positions we've been socialized to accept. So here we see like a picture of a woman breastfeeding her child. There's an image right here where we see a woman in a more sexualized and like sexualized position and a revealing kind of outfit. Here, over here in the right corner, bottom right corner, we see like a woman with her husband and her children. And these are all just historical pictures of it. And then I want to have like one image that kind of went against these traditional ideas. So I cut out a picture from history. Sorry, this is covering it up. From history that sort of depicted a woman quietly and sort of solemnly protesting, to introduce our topic of conversation, which is how power and intersectionality shape the conversation about pleasure. And yeah, so in this way, I want to show how we were going to examine, the traditional and normalized ideals set by the patriarchy and how that reflects on us today and throughout history. So, the second page that I did was on intersectionality in terms of racism and white patriarchy. I actually used this article from for my essay, and so I pulled from this as my main source, and I have it referenced at the bottom here. And so like the context for this page was that in addition to, general stereotypes assigned to each gender, um, there was also an impact based off of men of color and specifically Black men, um, and how they faced stereotypes based off of race, which has been enforced historically. And this article went through uh, it went through this specific case of uh, rape charges that a university student brought against these four Black men, and through that, the authors had discussed how racism sort of intersects with the patriarchy, and because it was because of the preservation, for the sake of the preservation of white hegemonic patriarchal power, and that the existence of the myth of Black men as violent brutes trying to harm white women, and white women being vulnerable and needing to be protected by white men, it like creates this like weird, like very complex interaction of, the superior party and an inferior party, even within male groups. So yeah, so the intersectionality of race and gender can create a very like high level of danger, and it creates dangerous racial stereotypes and that have deep historical implications, and it's just been embedded into modern society, which we can see in that article because of how not only recent that article is, well, relatively recent, um, but also just how we perceive Black men today. And so for the imagery I have for this slide, I decided to cut out key quotes from the article that I'm using as my source to highlight, the racial stereotypes, the historical complexity, um, and then I cut out relevant historical images of Black men, which is, the topic of conversation, because I wanted to focus on sort of like the layers of like, the stereotypes. I want to focus on like the faces, like this image up here where we have like this like piece right in the top left corner. I want to like sort of, I don't know, I want to like emphasize the humanity of it in contrast to like the racial stereotypes that was discussed in the article. Yeah, so and I want to use like color as a way to sort of emphasize, stereotype like outer versus inner. Yeah, so that was my page.
Hi, my name is Eris, and my part of the zine explores the misogyny paradox and how it connects to incels. The misogyny paradox is the idea that straight men are socially required to love women but are simultaneously trained to hate or devalue them. This creates a cultural environment where affection and hostility exist side by side. Incels are men who identify as involuntarily celibate and believe they are denied sex by women, which they see as the root of their social and personal suffering. Their ideology, the black pill, frames women as holding all the sexual power and positions incels as victims at the bottom of a rigid gender hierarchy. One of the key starting points of the misogyny paradox is the term heterosexuality, which is not a natural or ancient term and was invented in 1868. There has never been a single stable or scientific definition of heterosexuality because it's built on shifting ideas about gender and identity, making it structurally unstable. This instability leads to mismatched expectations, frustration, and industries trying to fix straight relationships. Jane Ward describes industries like pickup artistry, sex advice, and relationship coaching as the heterosexual repair industry. Their goal is not to solve the underlying issues, it's to perform affection or desire to make straight relationships appear functional. These industries reinforce gender stereotypes and often encourage manipulative or misogynistic behavior. Pickup artist culture overlaps with incel ideology because both treat women as systems to hack or objects to win. Pickup artists frame intimacy as a series of tactics, not genuine connection. Incels take this further. If the tactics don't work, they see themselves as victims of women's power. Incels believe society is a sexual hierarchy with chads at the top and beta males at the bottom, as seen on the pyramid on my zine. At the top is a chad, which is an archetype of the attractive, socially dominant man whom incels believe gets automatic sexual and romantic success. A normie is just below him, which is an average, regular person who isn't extremely attractive but can still participate normally in dating and social life. Someone incels see as living outside of their marginalized condition. A cuck is an insult incels use for men they see as weak, submissive, or dominated by women, often used to mock non-incel men who respect or support women in their female relationships. Reddit is a platform that incels use to spread their misogyny and encourage others to take the black pill, as seen on the zine. Taking the black pill means to indoctrinate yourself into the incel community and adopt their ideology. They interpret romantic rejection as a form of oppression, and the black pill worldview tells them that their failures are predetermined by biology or their looks. Women become the source of their misery and are blamed for male suffering. Rationality and the ability to use logic are what sets humans apart from other animals. When men deny women traits like these, they are more likely to justify or excuse sexual aggression because they no longer see them as people. It also makes them see women as objects or prizes to be won and turns them into caricatures. The pictures on the right side of my zine are examples of this and were found on the r/incel subreddit. On the bottom is the Becky, who they think is a homebody and delusional for thinking men want her because she's so plain and doesn't seem to want their attention as much. Next is the Stacy, which is the Chad of women. She is undesirable for a relationship because she's a slut and dresses provocatively, but they still envy the men who do get to have sex with her. At the top, we have their ideal woman who has zero access to other men, is a stay-at-home mom, and devotes her entire life to her husband. On the bottom left, you can see an ad that I got for a pickup artist course located in Seattle, which costs almost $350. Even the name of the company, Alpha Man Training, is in reference to the alphas of incel culture, and you pay for guidance to fit into society, but they have a twisted sense of what normal human function is and think that the only way to fit in is to get as many women as possible. Pickup artists also exacerbate incel ideology because typically the main goal is to get sex or a relationship. And when you make the finishing line something that you can get from women and you don't care which woman it comes from, then all women become the only obstacle standing in your way and they become the enemy. This reflects the misogyny paradox because incels want intimacy with women, but also develop deep resentment towards them. They simultaneously elevate women's power by claiming that they are in control and oppress men, and degrade them by seeing them as irrational or subhuman. This is the misogyny paradox in its most extreme form. Online spaces like Reddit amplify dehumanization through comment sections, memes, and echo chambers. Language like bop or future wife or rating women numerically reduces them to objects, and when this becomes normalized, it lowers empathy and increases the acceptance of violence, especially sexual. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Maya, and I focused on the phallocentric society in context of queer pleasure. The phallus is the ultimate symbol of sexual power in our patriarchal sexual culture and society. The phallus has dictated the scripted sex for generations, and phallocentrism shows up in art, architecture, language, and religion. Still, queer lesbian community occasionally wields the phallus to reclaim power, separating patriarchy from the phallus, separating men from their power. On the left side of the spread, I focused on the phallus in society as an everyday occurrence along with historic symbolism. I included the Christian Holy Trinity in the shape of the penis, highlighting how religion, which dictates much of Western culture, is inherently phallocentric. The text "I'm Not a Man" is made up of snippets of a poem cut from a newspaper, showing that manhood is tied to the size and power of the penis. The statue of David is contradicted by the sculpture of Pan, the size of their penises representing personal characteristics of these figures. On the right side of the page, I collaged queer symbolism with the intrusive presence of the male gaze and also the reclamation of phallic power in the context of queer pleasure, with the pink silicone penis attached to the strap. We often shy away from the image of a vulva, deeming it unsightly while actively parading phallic imagery. Queerness is often only accepted if it can be sexualized for the male gaze, but often queer people reclaim power by stripping men from the equation of sex and harnessing the power of the penis for personal, unobserved pleasure. So now, as you take a look at the zine imagery, I'm going to read these snippets of my a personal essay that I wrote about how patriarchy shapes pleasure. And this kind of explains a little bit more about the message that this zine is presenting. So, patriarchal society regulates pleasure by defining real sex as male-centered, penetrative, and goal-oriented. Penis goes in vagina, penis moves in and out of vagina, penis ejaculates, sex is now over because you have decided it's over. Ward 2020. In this way, patriarchy's definition of sex reaffirms that power and the right to decide when pleasure ends belongs to the men. The phallus is the ultimate symbol of sexual power in our patriarchal sexual culture and society. As the text reminds us, the child is presented with two categories of humans: males who embody the full grandeur and power of humanity, and females who, in Simone de Beauvoir's words, are defined as other in a phallocentric society. Foz and Swank 2013 illustrates this through how sex toys are marketed. Though sex toys are clearly meant to stimulate women, the packaging in traditional sex toy shops portrays men as the primary purchasers and disseminators of sex toys to their women. When women repurpose these symbols, they threaten the logic of male dominance. For example, if women can penetrate each other, or if the phallus functions as a symbolically castrated or dismembered man, it undermines men's monopoly on patriarchal and sexual power. Pause and Swing, 2013. By using the dildo as a humorous foreplay device rather than the centerpiece of quintessentially phallic intercourse, one participant stripped the dildo of its masculinized power to deliver pleasure. Patriarchy depends on linking masculinity to control. When women reclaim symbols of sexual power, they challenge this argument. Acceptable masturbation for women involves masturbating in front of a man for their pleasure, which illustrates how even acts of self-gratification are perceived and acted on as performances for male consumption and fantasy. Patriarchal ideology thus defines pleasure not as an individual experience, but as a reflection of male validation. As Van Roosmalen, 2000, notes, patriarchal definitions of sexuality and gendered relationships work to keep females under control or in their place. Thank you for listening, and I hope you like the zine.
Hello, my name is Evan Wynn. For this scene, I focused mainly on toxic masculinity in relation to patriarchy. The main goal of my zine, at least, was to connect the literary ideas with the visual ones I want to introduce here. So here's the scene. I say straight away that it's pretty visually intense. The main ideas was to focus on here were the socialization of masculine values, the objectification of women, and the dehumanization of feminine nature. To express on these ideas, I added this line motif. You can see we have arrows throughout, crosses, these large bisecting lines starting on this body, swirls, this whole idea of lines. The idea is that lines can only guide your thoughts, railroad you, but imprison you, trap you, hit you, and kill you like an arrow can, or socially crucify you like a cross. Let's get on to the presentation itself. You can see that the lines create different sections of the scene. On this left side, as mentioned before, we have the masculine side. I decided to put words like sacred, strong, power on this side. And that's opposed to the right side, which has weak, queer, communist, apocalypse. It's generally negative connotations for non-normative behaviors, not just heteronormative. Um, and you can see that the images themselves also contrast. On the left side, we have men that are relatively unedited, in contrast to the ones on the right, where in the bottom right, you can see that body is heavily drawn on, defaced, edited just like a teacher would, put red marks in an essay. And all this to show the contrast that the idea of masculinity is sort of in opposition to femininity, that in order to embrace a patriarchy, you have to reject the feminine aspects of yourself. And that gets into the religious motifs I tried to present here. You can see throughout we have Genesis 3:3, knowledge of good and evil, forbidden fruit. In the top right, you have Eve holding an apple. All this is to connect it to the idea of the social sin of rejecting your feminine nature. That apple that Eve is holding in the top right, you can sort of think about it as the rejection of your feminine nature, that the original sin, when you become a man, the original sin, your loss of innocence, is when you reject your emotional self, and you reject your feminine aspects, accept the suffering into your life. And that's sort of the parallel I was trying to play, in that this rejection of innocence, the loss of innocence in men, that the instilling of patriarchy is paralleling a lot of the religious motifs that we surround ourselves with. And it reminds us of this religion of patriarchy, this religion of masculinity that we've built for ourselves, that both men and women adhere to, even if not explicitly. It permeates all aspects of our life. It dictates behaviors, what we can wear, what we can say, where we go, what we do. And this whole zine, the idea I wanted to express is that whole sort of expanse of this religion that we've inadvertently created for ourselves and are constantly enforcing. That's why if you see the bottom right there, start with these red lines showing violence, showing hate, restriction, going throughout the whole page, showing how the whole page is the world of our thoughts, how it traps us here. There's so much more I can go into this scene, but those are the main ideas. I put a lot of effort into this, and I hope you enjoy it. It was very fun to make. Thank you.